Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another transfer show. It's myself and Mike today, and we've got some more good news for you. Areola is finally a West Ham player, so our second signing of the window over the line. 7.5 million is meant to be what it's rumoured for, which is, brilliant considering we thought was 10 million, and we thought that was a coup. So, Mike, how happy are you with Areola signing for such a cheap fee?
Yeah, I think it's a great deal for us. I think X said that it's 7.75 or whatever it is now, and then it's could go up to about 10, maybe 11 million or something, with kind of bonuses and performance related kind of pieces. So you can't look at it as a bad deal, is it? I don't think you're going to find a goalkeeper for that kind of money in this market. Even there was obviously quite a clamour for Nick Pope, but even he cost 10 million quid. So we've actually got a goalkeeper who's arguably better than Pope.
Yeah.
For £2.5 million less. Obviously, the wages are probably going to be a bit different between the two of them, so that probably narrows that gap. But you can't help but feel we've got ourselves what it could potentially be a world-class goalkeeper. You don't play for PSG or Real Madrid if you don't have talent. Obviously, he's not necessarily been a starter in those teams. But again, when you look at the plethora of talent that those guys have had in goal, it's kind of not a surprise that he's maybe not kind of put his way in there. But, for us, given a run of games, I think probably got ourselves our long-term goalkeeper for the next 6 or 7 years, really. It's just a great signing. I can't really see any downside in the deal, if I'm being perfectly honest.
No, I'm absolutely over the moon. He's a player that Moyes has worked with, so we don't have to. We're already getting rid of that unknown factor, and he's already proven himself to West Ham fans that he's good enough. So I think it's a really good signing, and one that's probably going to go under the radar for most of the transfer window, because 7.5 million for that kind of goalie, like you said, that's played for PSG, Real Madrid. Has played in European competitions for us already. It's fantastic. And, Fabianski hopefully got that 1-year contract extension. We've seen him in training, so looks like he's going to be around next season. But I guess it now bodes the question of who Moyes will start in the Premier League, because we've still got Conference League and we've still got, FA Cup, League Cup. And we saw Areola last season, he had clean sheets against Man U, Man City, Sevilla, Lyon, just to name a few of the teams, and it's going to be quite a dilemma, because now Moyes has got Fabianski, who he likes and trusts, but he's also gone and got Areola, who he clearly likes because he's got him on a permanent. So who do you think Moyes is going to pick for his number one spot for next season in the Prem?
Yeah, I think he'll play it coy at first, and not give out as to who he thinks. My hope is it's Areola, because I would prefer, when we look at who's going to be our goalkeeper, or who we have, that you reward the longer term signing or the longer term player. Fabianski does arguably deserve a final bow, but also in the same token, you have to progress and you need to keep moving on. And if he's not part of our long term future, then arguably speaking, this is my own personal preference, you stick with players that are part of your long term plan rather than your short term plan. So it wouldn't surprise me to see, say, Fabianski start the season, and then be phased out, because, again, as you said, he's comfortable with him, he knows him. Just to kind of, yeah, I don't know, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think it could also follow a bit like with Ben Rama. We expected him to be much like the same and been out of the team, but he ended up being quite a key figure throughout the season. So it's always interesting second guessing with Moyes.
Yeah.
I think he might be our key starter, but you never know. There's always that point where he may go with Fabianski to start the season and then phase him out over, say, a few games, because, again, it's that comfortability. But with 3 French speakers now playing, or 2 French speakers playing centrally in defence, having someone else who can be there, so you can have 3 players all speaking in their native language, or give or take their native language, with each other, is probably the smarter option, I would say.
Yeah,
you never know with Moyes, right? Do you?
exactly. I mean, it's an interesting one because Areola's 29, Fabianski's probably only got one more year with us. So if you like you say, if you're thinking long term, what we're building, Areola has to start in the Prem for me. I think he's already proven to every West Ham fan that he can do it, and it would be a surprise to see him sitting on the bench in those Premier League games throughout the season again, because then it would kind of start to question why we did make this a permanent signing. If he tended to keep Fabianski in his number one, but Connor makes a good point here. He said he's really over the moon with both Agard and Areola, and he thought we'd lose one of them when Newcastle came sniffing around. And I guess that's another point is we've got 2 deals over the line relatively comfortably. Agard was a bit of a wobble, but we've got them over the line, and it kind of says a bit more about the direction we're heading in as a football club in terms of our transfer strategy and actual pulling power with the club right now.
Yeah, I put a tweet out the other day that Moyes with a bedded in scouting system is clearly moves a lot quicker. Is a lot more decisive, mainly because he's very fastidious and he likes to have a lot of reports. And I'm sure that I've seen before when I was talking about Moyes there, he likes to have essentially targets for the next 2 to 3 years already lined up in what he wants. And then obviously organically it changes because new players come about or players lose form and so on, or even move. But he likes to have essentially a progression plan as to this is my player for this year. Year 2, I want this player. Year 3, I want that player. So when you look at it in that way, by having a team that's now been bedded in for a while, there's clearly a stronger voice coming as to you need to look at these players. So it's maybe also challenging in his thought processes because, we do know that he likes to review players on his own. He likes to be very involved, but I don't think the world of football now allows for that much of a hands-on approach, and there needs to be a bit more trust to wider teams. And I think Newman, coming from Manchester City, again, has that bit of clout in that he's come from a big club. He's helped them build what they have today. Obviously, he's worked on a much larger scale when we talk about money and players and so on. But again, he still had to go out and find those players that suit a style. So he's not going to be bringing essentially duds to the table. And I think we can see that in some of the players that have been brought to the tables. And he's clearly helping making those decisions quicker. Obviously, we still have the same person managing and involved in negotiations, but I think we have a team now that's starting off that initial process and doing a lot of the due diligence way before we get to a point of making a bid. So when we do bid, we're bidding because that is a player we want, as opposed to this is a player we're putting the feelers out for and seeing how we or they feel once we start having that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice little segment into the next one because, like you mentioned there, Newman's kind of power and pulling power, like you mentioned, of working at City and attracting those kind of caliber of players and bringing those to the table is what we've kind of seen a difference in this summer with the players we've been linked with. And one of those was Arnaut Danjuma of Villarreal. Had an excellent season for them last season. And it's just recently come out in the past couple of days that he's been linked with us and his agent has perhaps offered him to us. And he kind of wants that move back to the Premier League. But I think it's a risky one. I think at the moment they're saying there's rumours that it's going to be under 40 million for his release clause if a team did want to come and pay it. Obviously, he's been at Bournemouth before as well. So he has played in England and then he went to Villarreal. They took a chance on him and he'd done really, really well, especially in the Champions League last season. So is this the kind of sign-in that Newman, like you mentioned, is bringing to the table? Because we've already seen that Moyes wasn't particularly keen on Danjuma in the past when he's kind of looked at him. But, last season's absolutely performed brilliantly. So do you think this kind of deal and, Danjuma being linked to West Ham is concrete, or is it just kind of one of those paper rumours that we'd probably expect to die down in the next couple of weeks anyway?
Yeah, I think first off, what I think it does show is that there's a particular type of winger, shall we say, or what inside forward that we're looking for. So I don't think when I see the kind of links to say McNeil and so on, it doesn't seem like these are deals that are coming from Moyes and Newman. There seems to be a much higher focus on high quality players in Europe, but also players that have, in most cases, played at some level of European football. Danjuma previously, there were question marks on temperament, which has also been brought out as to why Newcastle aren't going for him because of, again, this is all allegedly. Howe has kind of erred on the side of caution and said, we don't want to get involved. I think the player Danjuma was at Bournemouth is different to the player he's been since he's been in Villarreal. He's also played a different role, so he's had to kind of change the way he works and so on as well. But I think it clearly shows that we are maybe looking at players that we've maybe before said no to and just re-reviewing them and going, well, what have we potentially missed and what could they offer? I think last season it was clear what Danjuma could have brought to West Ham. His first season in the Premier League was a bit hit and miss. In the Championship, obviously, he was electric, much like Sarr was for Watford last season. He was absolutely electric. Funny enough, another player we're apparently linked to. So, and I think sometimes Moyes is the type of kind of manager who likes to see players play at a more, I guess, considered elite level before he wants to kind of look at them. Obviously, he proved it in Champions League. The game against Manchester United in particular, he was incredible in that game. He just tormented them down that left-hand side for the whole 90 minutes. And I think he got an assist in that game as well.
Yeah.
So he is a player that will get you goals. He's a player that can create assists. Obviously, played up front this year. But when you look at where he's kind of picking up the ball and dribbling and taking it, you can see that he is basically a left-sided player. He's normally played as a front two, and what that's allowed him to do, because the way they play the front two is they split essentially and they sit on the fullbacks and then do diagonal runs in. So he's been able to play as that inside forward and have a lot of freedom in that team. I guess Moyes' concern would be if you look at statistically this year, he defensively, when you look at like defensive duels and things like that, it's so incredibly low. But again, the problem I have when you look at, say, defensive stats is that they don't necessarily tell a whole story, because if you look at duels and you look at those kind of things, you don't have many duels, and obviously you're not engaging the opposition. But then if your win percentage is high, then that means, well, you don't necessarily go into duels, but you are effective when you do. Defending has so many other elements, such as how you press, when you press, how you kind of position and so on. So there's other things that statistics don't map to. So it's very difficult to just use statistics alone to judge a player on defending, which is what I have seen some with Danjuma. And obviously there has been question marks about his temperament. But if you look at this year, there doesn't appear to be any noises as to his temperament being an issue at Villarreal. He's played incredibly well. Yeah, he may be a bit selfish on the pitch, but show me a striker that isn't a bit selfish. Look at Harry Kane, for instance. He's incredibly selfish on the pitch, but he has the talent to back it up, as much as I hate to say that. And I think that's the same again when you look at with Danjuma, in the sense that he's selfish because he wants to score and he wants to win. Now, as long as that's balanced, that's great. Obviously, when it tips over, it's when you have a problem. The same thing's been said about Memphis Depay before, that he has that issue.
Yeah.
Again, he's also, when he was at Lyon, absolutely incredible. So it's something that some players, for lack of a better term, grow out of. But I don't necessarily see an issue with Danjuma signing. I think it's an exciting signing. He's quick, he's direct, he's pretty much what we have in Bowen, but a player that's far more involved with the ball and can actually drag you up the pitch. So he pretty much does what Ben Rama does, but he has pace and can also score. So it's kind of getting the same, but better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, there's 3 key positions that I would want us to strengthen in, and I feel like we kind of lack, especially when we're in possession. The first one has been left back, where we've been very limited to Cresswell and his offensive capabilities as well as his defensive capabilities. The other one is that central midfield role next to Declan Rice, because as good as Thomas Suchek has been for us, he's not the player that will come and get the ball and make those progressive passes. And more often than not, last season, if we were playing against a Burnley or someone like that, where we had more of the ball, it would be Rice coming back and picking the ball off the centre backs and trying to drive us forward and then try and find those key passes where we find it really, really difficult. And the other, the third position is on that left wing where Pablo Fornals has been playing a lot and Moyes hasn't really been playing Benrahma out on the left. And for me, it looks very imbalanced whenever we do that because it's very much dependent on the pace down the right with Bowen and the link up with Antonio. And Fornals is often the one that will come inside, collect the ball, nice and pretty. And you can kind of see his more natural position is more centrally, and he much prefers playing in that central attacking midfield role. So I think a signing like Danjuma would absolutely balance the team. Like you mentioned before, his pace, similar to Benrahma in terms of his dribbling and how he kind of promotes himself on the pitch, but he's also got a much better final third end product right now. And that's kind of been probably one of the criticisms of Benrahma, I'd say, from most West Ham fans, is that he hasn't performed on a consistent level enough in the final third. And that's what Danjuma will bring to this team, based on last season. So I think that would be an absolutely fantastic signing. I think it's a long shot at the moment. But you never know. You never know. We've made some decent signings already, and it looks like we're on the up. So I think that would be an absolutely brilliant signing. And like you mentioned, he's got all the attributes I think we're missing on that left-hand side, especially when Benrahma isn't playing. So it's going to be an interesting one to keep tabs on for sure, because it's not something that will just happen overnight. It'll be an expensive signing. It'll be one of our most expensive signings of the window. And another one that is a name that's been mentioned today and yesterday is kind of linked with us is Youri Tielemans of Leicester. Now, this is an interesting one because Arsenal have already gone and signed Vieira, and it looks like they're still in talks with Tielemans, but it's perhaps more unlikely to happen. And with him having only 1 year left on his contract, Leicester are kind of in a predicament where if they want to sell him, they have to do it this summer. Because he's already made it clear he's not going to sign a new contract, or they run the risk of letting him go for a free next summer. So I think he'd be available for around 30 million, maybe 35 million at a push. And it could come to maybe later on in the window where they're at a point where they need to sell him and he wants a move. And, maybe it's not an Arsenal and, Man United have gone and got De Jong and they don't need a Tielemans. So it's definitely one to keep an eye on. And like X mentioned, he's just a name that we could go for. It's kind of speculation at the moment. But how excited would you be by Tielemans? Is he a player you would want at the club? Is it a yes from you or is it a no from you?
It's a yeah. I have other players I'd put ahead of him at the moment. Just my own personal preference for what I think we need. But, he's a player who can find a pass. He can pick between, lines. He has a habit of scoring from time to time. There's absolute thunderbolts out of nowhere into the top corner. I personally wouldn't go any higher than 25 million. I know that sounds ridiculous in some ways because he is so high quality, but again, he has a year left. Whilst we need a player in that position, the onus is more on Leicester to get as much as they can for him than it is for us to give him that money. So for me, it's if he's interested, the most I'd be putting on the table is 25 million and that's it. They can ask for 30, they can ask for 35. If someone takes him, it'd be a shame, but I personally would be kind of begrudging to spend that much money on a player who has a year left on his deal. Granted, once you sign him up, even if you paid 30, 35 million, he's then worth 40, maybe 50 million anyway. So you're making money, but why would you pay more when you could just essentially say, okay, fine, we're not going to try now. We'll just come back in January when he has 6 months left.
I think the risk with that, though, is other clubs will come in for him. This, like I was mentioning before, Arsenal looking elsewhere and, United perhaps getting De Jong. We might miss our opportunity and it's another what if.
We might miss our opportunity, but again, he's a good player, but there are others out there. There are other players who score more consistently from midfield than him. There are players who have equal passing ability than him. There are players who run a lot harder than he does. If you think back to when we played Leicester, the amount of times that he just got breezed past by Rice and then just seem to jog back. So a player can get beat in midfield, and then there's not necessarily one who's going to come charging back.
Can that change under Moyes?
I think it's part of him as a player, to be honest. He's got very good movement to find space and find those passes, but defensive discipline, I don't think necessarily is one of his strong suits. He will get back and he will do it, but I think even Brendan Rodgers has talked about his discipline defensively, and maybe the fact that he sometimes lacks the desire in which to chase back and get into position. I wouldn't say that's him all the time, but again, it kind of depends on what team we want to be next season. But I think Tielemans works in a free for us as opposed to in a double pivot. It's obviously very exciting because it's two good names. To have Rice and Tielemans together is exciting. But I just wonder if the not having the legs in midfield would count against us with how Moyes likes his team to set up, and sometimes he does like to give up ground, and you do have to do a lot of kind of work off the ball. So does Tielemans necessarily suit that system? Possibly not. I think we're trying to be more progressive and more possession based, but we do also like to concede a lot of ground to teams and try and play that way. So there is excitement to it. But for me, I'm also just like, if it happens, it happens. It doesn't, okay, that's fine. I'm kind of okay with it.
Yeah, I think for me, why I would be so excited by this is because the amount of times I've watched us when we play against a team that will sit back and we have more possession, the amount of times we struggle in those games is ridiculous. There was so many times last season where it happened, especially at home, Brentford, Newcastle, Burnley, all of those kind of games where you should be winning them, and those kind of players in your team, I think we do win them. That's the difference, because Souček is a fantastic player and he has been a fantastic player for us, but he just doesn't do that. And more often than not, like I mentioned before, Rice was the one having to try and do it. And I just don't think he has the capabilities to play those progressive passes through the lines to the likes of Ben Rama or Bowen and really try and open defenses when it can be very difficult to find those spaces. And I agree that, when we're playing that low block, it's not Tielemans' style. Like, it's not going to suit how he plays or the way we want to play. But I think, like I mentioned before, we want to become more possession-based. I think if we want to keep developing as a team and as a squad and as a club, we just need to have more of the ball. We need to be a more dominant team, especially at home. We can't just be sitting back. It works great, away from home and in certain scenarios, and it can be really effective, against the likes of Liverpool and Man City that we saw last season. But it's those games against Newcastle, it's those games against Burnley where we're struggling. And, Lanzini's, we saw, a couple of seasons ago that he was the one that was playing next to Rice and it was kind of working. But again, Lanzini's not one that's going to try and make those progressive passes. He's very cautious on the ball. He's very pretty on the ball and he's excellent with it, but he's not he's not a Tielemans. He's not always forward thinking. He's not kind of more willing to take that risk. And I think for 25, 30 million, it's an absolute no-brainer for me. I would be all over that. I would be trying to make that happen. But yeah, I guess it's all hypothetical.
I think the other thing as well, he's already on, I think, about 120k as it is already at Leicester. So to sign, he's probably going to want 150, let's say, for argument's sake. So again, it's, whilst in theory and on a paper it all looks good, financially, does it make much sense to us at the moment when you could potentially get someone who is just as good? You maybe pay a little bit more in the interim, but you get more out of it in the long term because they're on a lesser wage. They can potentially have a higher kind of, price in terms of a resale. Should we move forward? Because we've got to remember, I think Tielemans, 25, 26. So I know that's not old, but we sometimes do have to think about, in 2 to 3 years, if we have to sell them, where is their price going to be? I think obviously at 25, that's fine. 25 mil, that's fine. If you start going up to like the 40 and so on, then it might be harder to be able to regain that money if we need to sell him or if we want to sell him on.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's a very valid point. And there's this last kind of transfer room I want to talk about. I want to keep it very brief because I'm sure most West Ham fans are pretty bored of the name. And that name is Jesse Lingard. Again, looks like there was reports coming out. I can't remember who it was, but they were kind of saying that we're in talks with him again and the deal's getting closer. X has since come out and said there's not really much change in that. And it's still the fact that Moyes wants him and he's just waiting for his offers at the moment. Lingard, he's got a few on the table and it just seems to be never ending. I mean, we're just getting pretty bored of it now, but the annoying thing is because he was so good for us and it's a player that, you know, would be an excellent addition to the squad. I think that's why most West Ham fans have been this patient with it up to this point. But I guess it just poses the question, Mike, is it time to just call it a day with Lingard and look elsewhere? Or do we just stick around and hope that he chooses us and it's what Moyes wants at the end of the day?
Yeah, if it was me, I would have called it time after the first time he said no. I said then, if he wanted to join, he would have joined. He didn't. He wanted to apparently play with Ronaldo. Didn't get really the chance to do that. Second time around, yes, United blocked it, but he could have put up a bit more resistance, I think. And again, we put in an offer this summer and it doesn't seem to be... It seems to be kind of taken as a bit of a, oh, that's nice. Cool. Cheers for the offer. I'm reviewing. And it's kind of like, well, if that's to me how he feels. It's just like, yeah, no, cool. I've got an offer to stay in the Premier League. You know, I did well there. I could go back. You know, I do quite like the club, but it just feels a bit... He's joining because we're offering a better deal than others, as opposed to he's joining because he wants to be here. And just really past Lingard. You know, if he's got to such a point now where there should have been an exciting deal for West Ham fans, but it's got to such a point where whether he signs or not, I don't actually care. I couldn't care less. If he turned up at Newcastle, I'd be like, okay, and
yeah,
it's got to a point where it's a deal that has no real fanfare anymore. All the excitement and potential joy out of it has been sucked out because it's just so protracted. But you know, it seems like Moyes is a bit like a jilted lover, just trying to convince them to come back to him.
I mean, yeah, it was like last season. I think when he was with us, you know, there was always those talks that he got kind of preferential treatment at the club, and you know, Moyes stayed in the same hotel and stuff as him or apartment blocks. So yeah, it's very much. I think it's very much a Moyes player at this point. It's not Newman kind of pushing this in terms of the transfer strategy. It's just a player we're hoping to try and, you know, get because Moyes wants him at the end of the day, and it's kind of Moyes's. Yeah, it's Moyes' love. He can't let go of it, and he just wants him back. But there was Larson that we were also linked with today. He's obviously now a free transfer. 25 years old, can play in that kind of Lingard role or as a forward. So should we be looking at those kind of deals? I know people are question marks whether his ability is quite there in terms of Jesse's level and what he would actually bring to the squad, or whether it'd be kind of one of those signings which is pretty pointless and he just kind of ends up being sold the next summer. But would you kind of take a risk on him?
It's a tricky one, right? Because I think if money then goes in other positions, then it may come down to, well, we need someone there, let's go for it. You could also argue, well, if you're going to play Lanzini as a 10 or Fornals as a 10, Vlasic is going. Do we really need him? Because that essentially means what we actually need is another left winger and a right winger. We don't actually need an attacking midfielder. I would probably argue we do because we need pace. And he does have some pace about him. He does have a nice left foot. But he hasn't really sparkled in the last year or so. And it starts to then reek of a deal we're looking at just because it's a free. And we know what happened last time we did loads of deals with, because they were just free and they were cheap and they're available and they seemed like a good deal. We've ended up flirting with relegation, not saying we're going to do that, but it's that same kind of atmosphere that came about from the 16-17 season where we We thought we
Yeah.
made smart signings because they were fairly inexpensive. There was some kind of good Premier League experience, but we got him free. It didn't work. I guess the argument is if he does come in, we sell him the next year and we buy him on a free. We'll probably can sell him for about 5 million, up to maybe 10 million. So it's kind of money for nothing in some ways. But I think Moyes wants to be past that. I'm pretty sure all of us as West Ham fans want to be past taking wild punts on players that really are being signed because it fills a gap rather than it actually improves what we have. And if you go by the letter of the law of what Moyes said as to he only wants players that improves either on his 11 or the players he has, I think that's a question mark as to who precisely he improves on in that attacking kind of range. I guess it's one to watch, but it's not one to necessarily get excited about.
No, I don't think it's a signing we need to really be targeting or that we need, because especially in that position, we need a player that's going to be able to challenge Antonio consistently if he's going to play as a forward. And even if he played in that kind of number 10 role, we need someone better than that. And I think we should be aspiring better than that at the point we're at as a club. So, yeah, I don't think that's one that's particularly interesting, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. There's plenty going on in the transfer market, not just with West Ham, with loads of clubs, especially in the Premier League. It looks like there's going to be lots of movement. We're only still in June, so we've still got another month or month and a half until the season starts. I think we start on the 10th of August, so it's going to be interesting. We've got 2 signings down. We said we needed 7 as kind of the ball mark, and we've got 2 of them. So that's a good start. We can be happy with how things are going, I think. So. Yeah, we're just gonna see how it goes. Hopefully, this time next week we'll have some more news for you guys to interact with, and hopefully we've addressed a few more positions that we need to sign in. But yeah, it's nice to see Areola sign today. Yesterday even. God, I thought it was today. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see Moyes' next move, because like we mentioned, there's still a lot of work to do in the transfer window for West Ham. It's by no means done. But it's a great start, and I think every West Ham fan can be happy with how things are going at the moment. Yeah. And I guess we just take it from there. But if you ever want to see kind of the analysis of these players that we get linked with, or more in depth and get more of an in-depth understanding about them, go check us out on Twitter, because Mike does some really good threads on those. It's on the screen now, so give that a follow, and you'll be able to see all of the players there that we've been linked with and what kind of profile they have and what qualities they would bring to West Ham. And you can kind of it helps you make your decision on whether you think we should sign them. But I'm sure there's going to be plenty of names that we're going to be linked with. So Mike, you're going to be busy making lots of threads, I think, this summer.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for watching anyway, guys. Really appreciate the support as always, and we're closing in on 100 subscribers. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a like on the video as always, and we will catch you on the next one. One thing left to say.
Come on your irons.